May 8, 1943. 11:42 p.m. North Atlantic, 420 miles southwest of Iceland. The darkness was complete, broken only by the faint phosphorescence of wave crests and the dim red lighting inside U-boat U-456's control room. Kapitänleutnant Max-Martin Teichert stood hunched over the chart table, plotting a course toward convoy HX-237, a formation of 42 Allied merchant ships steaming eastward from Halifax to Liverpool. The air in the U-boat smelled of diesel fuel, unwashed bodies, and the peculiar dampness that pervaded every submarine after weeks at sea. Teichert's intelligence briefing, transmitted from U-boat headquarters in Lorient via encrypted radio message, was specific and recent. Convoy position, speed, course, and estimated escort strength. The information had arrived 6 hours earlier, decoded by U-456's radioman using the submarine's Enigma machine, a device that looked like a typewriter housed in a wooden box, its internal rotors and plugboard connections transforming plain German text into seemingly random letter sequences that Allied forces supposedly could not read. At 11:43 p.m., Teichert ordered his submarine to surface and increase speed to 17 knots, racing to reach an intercept position ahead of the convoy by dawn. The U-boat's diesel engines roared to life, their exhaust creating a white wake visible for miles to anyone with radar, though Teichert believed radar detection ranges were insufficient to spot his submarine at night. U-456 was one of 20 U-boats converging on HX-237 in a coordinated wolf pack attack, the submarines guided to their target by radio messages from headquarters. All communications encrypted with Enigma settings that changed daily at midnight, settings that German cryptographers assured were mathematically unbreakable, protected by 159 quintillion possible rotor configurations that would take the enemy centuries to solve even if they captured an Enigma machine intact. What Teichert did not know, what no U-boat commander knew in May 1943, was that British codebreakers at Bletchley Park had been reading German naval Enigma traffic for over 2 years. The message that guided him toward convoy HX-237 had been decrypted by Allied intelligence within hours of transmission. The convoy's route had already been altered based on decrypted U-boat position reports. British and Canadian escort vessels knew approximately where every submarine in the Wolf Pack was positioned and were preparing to attack them before the U-boats could attack the convoy. At 3:17 a.m. on May 9, HMS Broadway, a British destroyer operating with HX-237's escort group, detected U-456 on radar at 8,000 yards and increased speed to attack. Teichert, still assuming his position was unknown to the enemy, was caught on the surface with insufficient time to dive. Broadway's first depth charge pattern caught U-456 at 80 feet, close enough that the explosions ruptured the pressure hull. The submarine sank in less than 2 minutes, taking Teichert and all 49 crew members to the bottom of the North Atlantic, 3 miles deep, their Enigma machine and code books destroyed in the sinking, the secret of Allied code-breaking preserved by their death. This pattern, German forces operating under the assumption that Enigma communications were secure, Allied forces reading those communications, and using the intelligence to devastating effect, and German crews dying without understanding how their enemies always seemed to know where they were, repeated across every theater of World War II from 1941 through 1945. The Enigma machine, Germany's guarantee of communication security, had become the Allies' most valuable intelligence source, providing strategic and tactical information that shaped operations from the Battle of the Atlantic to the invasion of Normandy. German trust in Enigma was absolute, grounded in mathematical analysis that proved the system was theoretically unbreakable. That trust would persist even as evidence accumulated that something was wrong, that Allied forces consistently anticipated German movements, that operations supposedly known only to German high command somehow became known to the enemy. The cognitive dissonance between mathematical certainty and operational reality would paralyze German responses until long after the intelligence advantage had determined the war's outcome. To understand why Germany trusted Enigma and why that trust proved catastrophic, one must first understand both the machine's sophistication and the context in which it was developed. The Enigma machine was invented in the 1920s by German engineer Arthur Scherbius as a commercial device for protecting business communications. The German military adopted and modified it in the late 1920s, recognizing that radio communications, essential for coordinating modern mobile warfare, were vulnerable to interception unless encrypted. The modified military Enigma was a marvel of mechanical encryption, using 3 or more rotors that stepped with each keystroke to create polyalphabetic substitution, so complex that traditional cryptanalysis methods were useless against it. The machine's operation was elegantly simple from the user's perspective. An operator would set the rotors to starting positions specified in daily code books, configure a plugboard that swapped letter pairs, then type the plaintext message. With each keystroke, electrical current would flow through the plugboard, through the 3 rotors in sequence, reflect off a stationary wheel called the reflector, flow back through the rotors in reverse, and exit through the plugboard again, illuminating a letter on a lampboard. That illuminated letter was the encrypted version of the original keystroke. The receiving operator, with rotors set to the same starting position and the same plugboard configuration, would type the encrypted message and read the plaintext from the lampboard. The rotors advanced with each keystroke, changing the encryption pathway, ensuring that the same letter encrypted differently each time it appeared in a message. The mathematical security of Enigma was formidable. With 3 rotors selected from a set of 5, each rotor having 26 positions, and a plugboard allowing 10 pairs of letters to be swapped, the total number of possible machine configurations exceeded 150 million, 150 quintillion. Testing every possible setting to decrypt a message would require computational resources that did not exist in the 1930s and 1940s. German cryptographic experts calculated that even if an enemy captured an Enigma machine, they could not decrypt messages without knowing the daily settings, and those settings changed at midnight every night, creating a moving target that manual cryptanalysis could never pursue successfully. This mathematical confidence was not unfounded. Enigma was genuinely secure against attacks using methods available in the First World War. What German cryptographers failed to anticipate was that enemies would develop entirely new approaches combining mathematical insight, captured material, operator errors, and industrial-scale mechanical computation. The symbolic object that recurs throughout this narrative, representing Allied technological and organizational superiority in signals intelligence, is the British Bombe machine, an electromechanical device designed specifically to attack Enigma encryption. The Bombe was not a computer in the modern sense, but rather a specialized calculator that could test thousands of rotor settings per hour by exploiting contradictions in the encryption process. The steady clicking and whirring of Bombe rotors searching for Enigma settings became the sound of Allied intelligence supremacy, a mechanical persistence that gradually revealed secrets German forces believed were absolutely protected. Each click represented another potential setting tested and rejected. When a bomb found a setting that matched the characteristics being searched for, it stopped, and human cryptanalysts would verify whether that setting successfully decrypted the target message. The bombs ran 24 hours a day throughout the war, their mechanical determination breaking into communications that German commanders trusted with their lives and the lives of their men. The British code-breaking effort centered on Bletchley Park, a Victorian mansion 50 miles northwest of London that became the nerve center of Allied signals intelligence in Europe. The organization that grew there during the war employed over 9,000 people by 1945, most of them young women recruited from universities for their mathematical aptitude or language skills. The work was compartmentalized, with most workers knowing only their specific task: intercepting German radio transmissions, transcribing them, operating bomb machines, indexing decrypted messages, without understanding how their work fit into the larger intelligence picture. This security through ignorance, combined with rigorous vetting and strict enforcement of the Official Secrets Act, kept the code-breaking secret throughout the war and for decades afterward. The breakthrough that made reading German Enigma traffic possible came not from mathematical genius alone, but from a combination of factors that German planners never anticipated working together. Polish mathematicians in the 1930s had made the first progress against commercial Enigma models, developing techniques to recover rotor wirings through mathematical analysis. When Poland fell in September 1939, Polish cryptanalysts escaped to France and shared their knowledge with British intelligence. The British expanded on Polish methods, recruiting mathematicians like Alan Turing, who developed theoretical frameworks for attacking Enigma systematically. But theory alone was insufficient. The breakthrough required captured materials, Enigma machines and code books seized from submarines or weather ships, that provided the daily settings British cryptanalysts needed as starting points for their attacks. It required mistakes by German operators, who sometimes used predictable message preambles or repeated phrases that created patterns Allied cryptanalysts could exploit. And critically, it required the bomb machines, designed by Turing and engineered by British industry, that could test settings at speeds human calculators could never match. German trust in Enigma was not merely institutional but deeply personal for the commanders who depended on it. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, based his entire operational concept on the ability to coordinate submarine wolf pack attacks via encrypted radio communications. His submarines reported convoy sightings and received targeting instructions through Enigma encrypted messages, creating a centralized command system that allowed Dönitz to concentrate U-boats against high-value targets. This system worked brilliantly in 1941 and early 1942, when U-boats were sinking Allied shipping faster than it could be replaced, creating what German submariners called the happy time. But by mid-1942, the tide began to shift. Allied convoys increasingly avoided areas where U-boats were concentrated. Escort vessels appeared where submarines had reported their positions. U-boat losses mounted while sinkings declined. Dönitz noticed these patterns and suspected that Allied forces had somehow compromised German communications security. He ordered investigations into Enigma's security in 1941, 1942, and 1943. Each investigation concluded that Enigma remained unbreakable, that Allied successes must be explained by improved radar, better direction finding of U-boat radio transmissions, captured documents, or other factors. The mathematical analysis was sound. Enigma's theoretical security was real. What the investigations failed to consider was that theoretical security could be overcome by non-theoretical methods. Exploiting operator errors, using captured daily settings to bootstrap attacks, employing specialized machines to test settings at industrial scale. German cryptographic experts were looking for mathematical vulnerabilities when the actual attack was operational and mechanical. The emotional contrast between German confidence and Allied reality was profound and sustained throughout the war. German commanders at every level sent orders and reports via Enigma encrypted radio, trusting that their communications were private. They discussed strategy, reported unit positions, described supply situations, assessed enemy capabilities, all the detailed operational intelligence that commanders must communicate to coordinate complex military operations. They could not know that British intelligence officers at Bletchley Park were reading these messages, sometimes within hours of transmission, and that the intelligence, codenamed Ultra, was being distributed to Allied commanders who used it to shape their own operations while carefully concealing the source to prevent Germans from realizing their codes were broken. The transformation in Allied fortunes once Ultra intelligence became available was dramatic enough that German commanders should have recognized something had fundamentally changed, yet most remained convinced that Enigma was secure. In the Battle of the Atlantic, U-boat effectiveness declined sharply from mid-1942 onward, as convoys were routed around submarine concentrations using decrypted position reports. In North Africa, British forces repeatedly anticipated German offensives because they had read Rommel's situation reports and supply requests. In the Battle of Kursk in 1943, Soviet forces, who received selected ultra-intelligence from their British allies, prepared defenses in exactly the sectors where German panzer concentrations would attack. Each time German operations encountered unexpected opposition, alternative explanations were found. Enemy reconnaissance must have spotted troop movements, agents must have betrayed plans, prisoners must have talked under interrogation. The possibility that Enigma was compromised was considered and rejected repeatedly because mathematical analysis said compromise was impossible. The systematic nature of Allied intelligence advantage extended across all German military communications. Luftwaffe Enigma traffic was broken relatively early, providing intelligence on German air operations that allowed RAF fighters to be positioned advantageously, and British cities to receive advance warning of bombing raids. Wehrmacht Enigma was more challenging, but was eventually broken, giving Allied ground commanders insights into German defensive plans and reinforcement schedules. German railway traffic encrypted with Enigma revealed logistics information that helped Allied planners understand German supply situations. German diplomatic traffic, also Enigma encrypted, provided strategic intelligence about Germany's relationship with neutral nations and Axis partners. The breadth of the intelligence take was staggering, thousands of messages daily, covering every aspect of German military operations, all decrypted and analyzed and distributed to commanders who learned to use the intelligence while protecting its source through elaborate cover stories. The bomb machines that made this decryption possible at scale represented British industrial capacity applied to a specialized problem. The first bomb, designed by Alan Turing and built by British Tabulating Machine Company, became operational in March 1940. By war's end, over 200 bombs were operating at Bletchley Park and its outstations, each machine representing thousands of hours of engineering work and specialized manufacturing. The Americans built their own improved version, the Navy bomb, faster and more capable than the British design, with 121 machines eventually operational. These devices were not elegant. They were large, loud, temperamental machines that required constant maintenance. But they were effective, testing Enigma settings at rates that made regular decryption of German traffic feasible despite the enormous number of possible machine configurations. The historical evidence of Ultra's impact comes from multiple sources. Decrypted messages themselves, preserved in Allied intelligence archives, post-war memoirs of participants once secrecy restrictions were lifted, German military records showing operations that were anticipated by Allied forces, and statistical analyses comparing outcomes before and after specific intelligence breakthroughs. The consensus among historians is that ultra-intelligence shortened the war in Europe by months and possibly years, saving countless lives by reducing the time required to achieve Allied victory. Specific estimates vary, but the strategic value is undeniable across multiple dimensions. In the Battle of the Atlantic, ultra-intelligence allowed Allied naval forces to route convoys around U-boat concentrations and to direct anti-submarine forces towards submarines whose positions were known from decrypted reports. The impact was measurable. Merchant ship losses declined while U-boat losses increased, reaching a climax in May 1943, Black May for German submariners, when 41 U-boats were sunk. Dönitz withdrew his submarines from the North Atlantic temporarily, effectively conceding defeat in the battle that Churchill later said was the only campaign that truly frightened him. The withdrawal was not caused by Ultra alone. Improved radar, more escort vessels, and better tactics all contributed. But Ultra provided the intelligence foundation that made other measures effective. In North Africa, British forces under Montgomery defeated Rommel's Afrika Corps partly because British intelligence consistently knew German supply situations and operational plans through decrypted Enigma traffic. The Battle of El Alamein in October 1942, which marked the turning point in the North African campaign, was fought by British forces who knew German fuel shortages and defensive dispositions through ultra-intelligence. Montgomery himself acknowledged after the war that Ultra had been invaluable in understanding his opponent's capabilities and intentions. In the invasion of Normandy, ultra-intelligence contributed to successful Allied deception operations that convinced German high command the landings would occur at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. Decrypted German messages revealed which deception measures Germans believed and which they doubted, allowing Allied planners to refine their approach. After D-Day, Ultra provided continuous intelligence on German reinforcement plans, allowing Allied air forces to target transportation networks that would have brought German reserves to the invasion beaches. The intelligence advantage extended beyond specific battles to affect strategic decision-making. Allied planners could assess German industrial production, fuel reserves, and troop deployments with accuracy impossible through other means. They understood German strategic debates because they read communications between Hitler and his field commanders. They anticipated German technological developments because German military messages discussed new weapons under development. This comprehensive intelligence picture allowed Allied leaders to make informed strategic choices, while their German counterparts operated with incomplete and often inaccurate intelligence about Allied capabilities. The recurring sound of bomb machines clicking through rotor settings represented not just British ingenuity, but the Allied approach to signals intelligence as an industrial enterprise. Breaking Enigma was not primarily about individual brilliance, though brilliant individuals certainly contributed, but about systematic organization. Intercepting thousands of German messages daily through global listening posts, transcribing them accurately, transporting them to Bletchley Park, running them through bombs that tested settings mechanically, analyzing successful decrypts to extract intelligence, and distributing that intelligence to commanders while maintaining absolute secrecy about the source. This was intelligence as industrial process, scaled to handle volumes of traffic that would have overwhelmed traditional cryptanalytic methods. German commanders operating under the assumption that Enigma was secure never developed this systematic approach to communication security. They focused on the machine's theoretical strength while neglecting operational security measures that might have complicated Allied codebreaking. German operators sometimes used predictable message preambles, repeated key phrases, or sent identical messages on different networks, all practices that created patterns Allied cryptanalysts could exploit. German procedural security was inconsistent, with captured code books sometimes remaining valid for days before their loss was reported and new settings issued. These operational weaknesses, combined with Allied systematic exploitation of them, meant that theoretical security became irrelevant. Enigma was mathematically unbreakable but operationally compromised. The transformation in German perception about Enigma security occurred slowly and unevenly. Some commanders suspected compromise early, but could not prove it and were overruled by cryptographic experts, who insisted the system was secure. Others noticed patterns, operations anticipated by enemies, convoys avoiding submarine concentrations, defensive preparations where attacks were planned, but explained them through alternative theories that preserved belief in Enigma. The psychological investment in the machine was too great to abandon without compelling proof, and Allied security measures ensured no such proof emerged during the war. Admiral Dönitz's suspicions about Enigma security in 1942 and 1943 led to investigations that examined the system from multiple angles. Could the machine be broken mathematically? Expert analysis said no. Could the daily settings be guessed or derived? The number of possibilities made this impossible. Could the British have built a computational device to test settings mechanically? German experts considered this but concluded that such a device would be too large, too expensive, and too slow to be practical. They were wrong on every point, but their error was reasonable given their assumptions about what was technically feasible. The bomb machines existed and were effective precisely because British engineers had pushed technical feasibility beyond what German engineers considered possible. By late 1943, evidence of compromised security was becoming harder to ignore. U-boat losses were catastrophic. Allied convoys consistently avoided submarine patrol areas, and German military operations routinely encountered prepared enemy defenses. Some German commanders advocated abandoning radio communications entirely and relying on couriers or landlines. But this was operationally impossible for submarines at sea and impractical for mobile ground warfare. Others advocated for a new encryption system to replace Enigma, but developing, producing, and distributing a replacement would take years Germany did not have. The practical choice was to continue using Enigma while implementing improved operational security procedures, changing settings more frequently, avoiding predictable message formats, limiting message content to essential information. These measures complicated Allied code breaking but did not stop it, because the fundamental compromise remained. The bomb machines could still attack the system mechanically, and captured materials continued to provide starting points for cryptanalysis. The cognitive dissonance German commanders experienced between mathematical certainty that Enigma was secure and operational evidence that somehow enemies knew too much created a form of intellectual paralysis. Accepting that Enigma was broken would mean acknowledging that Germany had been operating without communication security for years, that countless military failures had resulted from compromised intelligence, that the deaths of thousands of soldiers and sailors had been caused by German cryptographic vulnerability. This acknowledgement was psychologically difficult and organizationally devastating. It was easier to believe that other factors explained Allied successes, that improved radar or better reconnaissance or lucky guesses accounted for the patterns, that Enigma remained secure and required only procedural improvements to maintain its effectiveness. German intelligence services did capture hints that something was wrong. Agents reported that Allied forces seemed unusually well informed about German plans. Interrogations of Allied prisoners occasionally produced statements suggesting that detailed German intelligence was reaching enemy commanders, though prisoners never revealed sources. German intelligence analyzed Allied decisions and noted that they were often optimal responses to situations that Allied forces should not have known about through normal reconnaissance. But these fragmentary indications never coalesced into definitive proof that Enigma was broken, partly because Allied operational security was excellent, and partly because German analysts were looking for evidence that fit their preconceptions about how codes could be broken. The reality that German commanders did not learn until after the war was that Allied intelligence had been reading their most secret communications for years, that operations had been planned with knowledge of German intentions, that tactical advantages had accrued from understanding German capabilities through their own internal assessments. When German officers learned this truth after surrender, many refused to believe it initially. How could the mathematically unbreakable system have been broken? How could such a massive security failure have remained undetected for so long? The answers: that mathematical security meant nothing against systematic operational attacks, that Allied security measures had prevented detection, that German investigations had asked wrong questions based on false assumptions, required accepting that fundamental beliefs about communication security had been wrong throughout the war. The post-war revelation of Ultra's existence and scope had profound effects on historical understanding of World War II and on cryptographic practice going forward. When the Ultra secret was declassified in the 1970s, historians had to reassess nearly every major operation of the European war, understanding now that Allied commanders had fought with intelligence advantages that were unprecedented, and that German commanders had operated in ignorance of how much their enemies knew. Decisions that had seemed bold or lucky now appeared calculated based on solid intelligence. Allied victories that had been attributed to superior tactics or resources now appeared to reflect superior information. The war's narrative required rewriting with Ultra as a central rather than peripheral element. The cryptographic lessons were equally profound. Enigma's failure demonstrated that theoretical security based on computational complexity meant nothing if operators made mistakes, if material was captured, if enemies developed specialized machines to attack the system at scale, or if security procedures were inadequate. Post-war cipher systems incorporated these lessons, emphasizing operational security as much as mathematical strength, training operators thoroughly, implementing procedures to limit damage from captured materials, and assuming that determined enemies would find ways to attack even theoretically secure systems. The bomb machines that broke Enigma were dismantled after the war, their existence remaining classified for decades. The mathematical and engineering principles they embodied influenced early computer development, with several Bletchley Park veterans going on to careers in computing where their wartime experience in automated calculation and cryptanalysis informed their contributions to the emerging field. The intellectual legacy of attacking Enigma extended far beyond signals intelligence to shape how technologists thought about complex problem-solving, mechanical computation, and the relationship between theory and practice. For German military forces who had trusted Enigma throughout the war, the revelation of its compromise was a bitter epilogue to defeat. Submariners who had died believing their positions were secret learned posthumously that their enemies had known where they were. Ground commanders who had planned operations assuming secrecy discovered that their plans had been read before execution. The psychological impact on survivors was significant, a sense of betrayal not by their cryptographers, who had done their best with available knowledge, but by the system itself, which had promised security and delivered vulnerability. Some German veterans expressed grudging admiration for Allied cryptanalytic achievement once they understood its scale and sophistication. Others focused on anger at German intelligence failures that had not detected the compromise or developed adequate countermeasures. The broader truth that Enigma's failure revealed was about the nature of technological advantage in modern warfare. Germany had developed a sophisticated encryption system based on sound mathematical principles and had trusted it absolutely. But technological superiority is not static. It can be overcome by enemies who combine captured materials with operational analysis, mathematical insight, and industrial capacity to attack problems systematically. Germany's trust in Enigma reflected confidence in German technological superiority, that blinded commanders to the possibility that enemies could match or exceed German capabilities through different approaches. The lesson was that no technological system is absolutely secure, that operational security matters as much as theoretical strength, and that enemies who are systematically organized and adequately resourced can find ways to compromise even well-designed systems. The clicking of bomb rotors searching for Enigma settings, heard continuously at Bletchley Park throughout the war, was the sound of systematic intelligence work at industrial scale. Each click represented another potential setting tested, another step toward revealing secrets that German commanders believed were perfectly protected. The steadiness of that clicking, machines running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for years, embodied Allied persistence and organizational capability. German forces had sophisticated encryption technology, but lacked the systematic intelligence infrastructure to exploit it while defending against enemy exploitation. Allied forces built that infrastructure, recruited and trained the personnel, developed the specialized equipment, established the procedures, and maintained the operational security necessary to turn cryptographic advantage into strategic victory. In the end, Germany trusted Enigma until the Allies had read everything that mattered: operational plans, supply situations, strategic assessments, tactical orders, and used that intelligence to shape the war's conduct in ways that made German defeat inevitable. The trust was not irrational. It was based on mathematical analysis that was technically correct. But correctness in theory meant nothing against systematic attack in practice, and German cryptographers never understood until too late that their opponents had developed methods that made theoretical security irrelevant. The Enigma machine, Germany's technological guarantee of communication security, became instead a window through which Allied intelligence watched German military operations in near real time, saw their plans before execution, understood their capabilities better than they understood Allied capabilities, and exploited that knowledge to coordinate military operations at strategic scales that would have been impossible without signals intelligence providing the information foundation. The metallic clicking of bombs testing settings, the sound that German forces never heard but that shaped their fate nonetheless, stands as a lasting symbol of intelligence warfare in the industrial age. Systematic, mechanical, persistent, and ultimately decisive. It was not the sound of battle, but the sound of secrets being revealed, of supposedly secure communications being read, of technological advantage being systematically exploited through organized intellectual effort supported by industrial resources. When the last bomb stopped clicking in 1945, it marked not just the end of a cryptanalytic campaign, but the end of an era when mathematical complexity alone could protect military communications. The future would require assuming that any system could be broken, that operations must be designed to succeed even if enemies read every message, and that security depended not on technological invulnerability, but on organizational resilience that could function despite compromise. Germany learned this lesson through catastrophic failure, their trust in Enigma transforming from their greatest strength in theory to their fatal vulnerability in practice. Revealed only after the war they lost had already demonstrated the consequences of fighting enemies who read everything while believing that nothing could be read.